Serpents and flying dragons have been a staple of ancient myth and legend of indigenous people around the world. The assumption has always been, however, that they are a metaphor and not a literal description of an actual being. How would they communicate this vision to others? And what about the stories of the Book of Enoch and the forbidden books of the Bible, which refer to the Nephilim, literally those who were cast down, and the Watchers, the so-called fallen angels? In the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, the Sumerian gods of heaven and earth are referred to as the Nephilim. The Sumerians themselves called the colonists Anunnaki. Stitching translates the biblical verses from Genesis 6:4 as, "The Nephilim were upon earth in those days, and thereafter too, when the sons of the gods collaborated with the daughters of Adam, and they bore children unto them. They were the mighty ones of eternity." And what does Nephilim actually mean? Normally translated in English as giants, the word stems from the Semitic root NFL, to be cast down. It means exactly what it says, those who were cast down upon earth. From a combination of our ancient secular and religious sources, it is possible to piece together the true story of our ancestry, which lies in the coming of the alien serpent gods or astronauts who colonized Earth many eons ago. In fact, the evidence lies in the myths and legends of the history of the world. The Sumerian legend of Gilgamesh and Agar points to the interaction of humans and serpents, and of course they are well-known serpent gods of the Indus Valley, the Nagas or serpent race of ancient India, the Hindu epics of Ramayana and Mahabharata, which also deal with the serpent gods. In Chinese history, V. King describes how men and dragons live peacefully together and even intermarried, and the serpent gods in America are described in the Mayan book Charlin Baal, where Itzamana, the serpent god, is revered by the people of the serpent. The story of St. George overcoming the dragon in England and St. Patrick driving the serpents out of Ireland are also part of the Christian mythology. Too many coincidences point to a pattern which has been seemingly willfully ignored by ivory tower mainstream academics and historians. The Anunnaki genetic engineering was done by combining the characteristics of the native ape-man or Neanderthal with their own saurian nature. The Babylonian priest writing in the 3rd century Athens claimed that the man's ancestry and origin can be traced to Ons, an amphibious creature that came from the Persian Gulf to teach the arts of civilization to man. Berosus called the Andoti, which translates as the repulsive ones in Greek. If the tradition has been invented, a more normal attitude would have been to glorify these creatures as the splendid gods or heroes, yet the fact that these choose to describe their ancestors this way. Carl Sagan critically titled one of his books The Dragons of Eden, but ancient Jewish legends describe the serpents of Eden as man-like. In other words, he looked like a man and talked like a man. What does this mean? The section of the Haggadah that deals with the creation describes the serpents who inhabited the garden before the creation of Adam as an upright creature that stood on 2 feet, that was equal in height to a camel. The serpent was man-like in many ways. He was tall and stood upright on 2 legs. He did all the work of the gods, particularly the mining and agricultural work, and above all the serpents had an intellect superior to man. These are all attributes of the Anunnaki. The coming of the Anunnaki coincided with the end of this period, as the earth began to dry out and the meat-eating dinosaurs and small mammals appeared. The reptile gods needed moisture and warmth, and probably the reason why civilization was founded at the mouth of the great river system, the Nile Delta, the Indus River, valley of the Tigris, Euphrates system. It appears the serpent gods were tall, at least 8 to 10 feet, and walked on 2 feet. They had a tail like a reptile, and a tough hide, somewhat like a lizard, but with a large amount of horny or scaly skin. Their hide was generally luscious and smooth, somewhat like a chameleon, and probably varied in different greens and greys. They had short horns on their head, which they considered to be a sign of divinity. Humans were repulsive to them because they were hairy, had soft skins, and bony limbs. The sons of the serpent gods, the Nephilim of the Bible, which descended before the deluge and mated with human women, also dabbled in genetic engineering. Satan and the fallen angels are more often pictured as serpent reptilians themselves. In one of the seemingly uncensored passages in the scriptures, Jesus rebuked them, saying, "Ye serpents, ye generations of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them ye shall encourage into your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of the righteous." More reference to the generation of vipers are in Matt 3:7, Matt 12:34-35, and Luke 3:7. They are also called princes of the world. Despite censoring, tampering, and editing of the Bible, cold words or euphemisms for the reptilians race in the Old Testament include terms like the wicked, mighty men, the giants, or the evildoers.
Dragon is the common name that refers to a variety of gigantic reptiles reported by people of ancient times. Dragons were also a common theme in mythology. The word comes from the Greek drakon, Latin draco, meaning a serpent of huge size. Although dragon legends are often dismissed as myth today, many of these stories may have a historical basis in sightings of recent dinosaurs. Countries such as England, China, Scandinavia, France, India, Egypt, and Arabia each recount numerous dragons of a variety of types. Ancient depictions of dragons have been found that span more than a millennia, which often bear remarkable similarity to known dinosaur species. There are, in fact, nearly 200 such places in Britain where dragon sightings have been reported throughout history. In his book After the Flood, Bill Cooper lists 81 locations in the British Isles alone. Multiple terrestrial, flying, and sea dragons were described by these cultures and known by various names. Many of these creatures were predatory to livestock or threatening to other industries and therefore often targeted by hunters and killed. The World Book Encyclopedia states the following about dragons. The dragons of legend are strangely like actual creatures that have lived in the past. They are much like the great reptiles, which inhabited the earth long before man is supposed to have appeared on earth. Dragons were generally evil and destructive. Every country had them in its mythology. There are a great many legendary accounts of dragons and their slaying from ancient times. The number and global distribution of these legends precludes any interpretation that the stories are myths. Secular researchers have recently concluded that the dragon and sea serpent legends in the early Middle Ages were based on real animals. Real animals, primarily pythons and whales, lie behind the ancient stories. Other animals, conflations of different animals, simple misunderstandings, and willful exaggerations are found to account for the fanciful embellishments, but primitive myths played no significant role in this process during classical times. Most creationists believe that many of these legends are in fact historic accounts of when humans encountered dinosaurs following the global flood. Herodotus, the Greek historian Herodotus, noted these observations during the 5th century BC. There is a place in Arabia, situated very near the city of Ptah, to which I went, on hearing of some winged serpents, and when I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents, in such quantities as it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of the water snake, but he has wings without feathers, and as like as possible to the wings of a bat. Alexander the Great in 330 BC. After Alexander the Great invaded India, he brought back reports of seeing a great hissing dragon living in a cave, which people were worshipping as a god. One of Alexander the Great's lieutenants, Onesicritus, stated that the Indian king Abysarus kept serpents that were 120 and 210 feet long. Subsequent Greek rulers are said to have brought dragons back alive from Ethiopia. Morvidus was king of the Britons from 341 to 336 BC, as recounted by Geoffrey of Monmouth. He was killed by a dragon or monster that appeared from the Irish Sea and began devouring the inhabitants of the western shores. In an attempt to stop this, Morvidus met the beast in single combat and used every weapon he could against her, but to no avail. The monster lunged at Morvidus and consumed him. Geoffrey described the animal as a type of dragon called a belluer, which gulped down the body of Morvidus as a big fish swallows a little one. Beowulf was a legendary heroic dragon slayer of the Geats who lived from 495 to 583 AD. His exploits include killing several sea reptiles and a terrestrial dragon called a Grendel. Beowulf ultimately lost his life at the age of 88 from wounds he received while fighting a flying reptile that may have been a giant pterosaur. The story of Beowulf is preserved in an epic poem of the same name that is often considered to be one of the most important pieces of Anglo-Saxon literature. Wall Dragon. The Wall Dragon is a famous dragon in Polish folklore, also known as the Dragon of Krakow. According to the legend, it lived in a cave under Wall Hill in the early 8th century. The cave, which is today a popular tourist attraction, is on the banks of the Vistula River in Krakow, Poland. The dragon is said to have eaten nearby cattle, and after many attempts to kill it, the beast was ultimately poisoned with sulfur by a man named Cracus, who later became the monarch and namesake for the city. St. George. Another famous account of a dragon slaying is the story of St. George and the Dragon, which was included in Jacobus of Origen's Legend or Golden Legend, a collection of saints' lives compiled around the year 1260 and translated into English and published by William Caxton in 1483. Cathedrals have been built in recognition of and named after St. George in Ontario, Canada, 1828, Perth, Australia, 1888, and London, England, 1848. There are also several in the United States. These cathedrals all proudly display a painting or relic somewhere depicting the slaying of the dragon by St. George. A modern version of the legend says, at the town of Cyrene, in Libya, there was a dragon, who was appeased by being fed 2 sheep a day. When these failed, the townsfolk offered by lot one of their young people. One day the lot fell on the king's daughter, who was led out to the sacrifice, dressed in her wedding gown. George appeared and transfixed the dragon with his spear, and then using the princess's girdle led the bemused dragon into the town, where it was beheaded. Catholic Encyclopedia. Marco Polo traveled through Asia, Persia, China, and Indonesia from 1271–1291 AD, and recorded his journey in the work titled The Travels of Marco Polo, which was published in 1300 AD. Much of his book detailed the interesting customs of the different ethnic groups he encountered, as well as the varieties of animals and plants associated with them. In chapter 49, Polo describes the dragons found in a province named Karajan, which is relayed in a matter-of-fact manner without any embellished mythologizing. He also goes on to explain the behavior of the creature and how the people of the area killed them. Marco Polo wrote, "Here are found snakes and huge serpents, 10 paces in length and 10 spans in girth, meaning 50 feet long and 100-inch circumference. At the forepart, near the head, they have 2 short legs, each with 3 claws, as well as eyes larger than a loaf and very glaring. The jaws are wide enough to swallow a man. The teeth are large and sharp, and their whole appearance is so formidable that neither man, nor any kind of animal can approach them without terror. Others are of smaller size, being 8, 6, or 5 paces long. 15. St. Leonard's Forest in 1614, a booklet was published describing encounters with a large reptile in St. Leonard's Forest in Sussex, near the village known as Dragon's Green. See excerpt below. This booklet contains speculation about their reproduction and supernatural abilities, along with lucid descriptions of a dragon slain in the neighboring Sussex County and numerous references to even more ancient historical sources. This serpent, or dragon as some call it, is reputed to be 9 feet, or rather more, in length, and shaped almost in the form of an axletree of a cart, a quantity of thickness in the midst, and somewhat smaller at both ends. The former part, which he shoots forth as a neck, is supposed to be an L, 3 feet 9 inches or 1 L 4 cms, long, with a white ring, as it were, of scales about it. The scales along his back seem to be blackish, and so much as is discovered under his belly, appeareth to be red. It is likewise discovered to have large feet, but the eye may there be deceived, for some suppose that serpents have no feet. The dragon rides away, as we call it, as fast as a man can run. His food, rabbits, is thought to be, for the most part, in a coney warren, which he much frequents. There are likewise upon either side of him discovered 2 great bunches so big as a large football, and, as some think, will in time grow to wings, but God, I hope, will, to defend the poor people in the neighborhood, that he shall be destroyed before he grows to fledge. Scientific description 1658. There be some dragons which have wings and no feet, some again have both feet and wings, and some neither feet nor wings, but are only distinguished from the common sort of serpents by the comb growing upon their heads, and the beard under their cheeks. Gylius, Bereus, and Gervinus do affirm that a dragon is of a black color, the belly somewhat green, and very beautiful to behold, having a treble row of teeth in their mouths upon every jaw, and with most bright and clear-seeing eyes, which caused the poets to say in their writings that these dragons are the watchful keepers of treasures. They have also 2 dewlaps growing under their chin, and hanging down like a beard, which are of a red color. Their bodies are set all over with very sharp scales, and over their eyes stand certain flexible eyelids. When they gape wide with their mouth, and thrust forth their tongue, their teeth seem very much to resemble the teeth of wild swine, and their necks have many times gross thick hair growing upon them, much like unto the bristles of a wild boar. Their mouth, especially of the most tameable dragons, is but little, not much bigger than a pipe, through which they draw in their breath, for they wound not with their mouth, but with their tails, only beating with them when they are angry. But the Indian, Ethiopian, and Phrygian dragons have very wide mouths, through which they often swallow in whole fowls and beasts. Their tongue is cloven as it were double, and the investigators of nature do say that they have 15 teeth of a side. The males have combs on their heads, but the females have none, and they are likewise distinguished by their beards. History of Four-Footed Beasts, 1658. Henham dragon. The Henham dragon is the popular name for a large serpent-like creature, dragon, sighted near Henham, Essex, England in 1669. Henham or Henham on the Hill is a small village with a current population of about 1,250. It is located in the northwest part of Essex, about 7 miles south of the historical town of Saffron Walden, where a flying reptile called a cockatrice was killed around the same time. The pamphlet at right was circulated in 1669, in Essex, England, regarding the recent sightings of a large reptile. Although seen by numerous people, attempts by local villagers to shoot the beast were unsuccessful. Glamorgan. As recent as the early 1900s, elderly folk in Glamorgan, a historical county of Wales, would tell of a colony of winged serpents that lived in the woods around Penllyn Castle. The woods around Penllyn Castle, Glamorgan, had the reputation of being frequented by winged serpents, and these were the terror of old and young alike. An aged inhabitant of Penllyn, who died a few years ago, said that in his boyhood the winged serpents were described as very beautiful. They were coiled when in repose, and looked as if they were covered with jewels of all sorts. Some of them had crests sparkling with all the colors of the rainbow. When disturbed they glided swiftly, sparkling all over, to their hiding places. When angry, they flew over people's heads, with outspread wings, bright, and sometimes with eyes too, like the feathers in a peacock's tail. He said it was no old story invented to frighten children, but a real fact. His father and uncle had killed some of them, for they were as bad as foxes for poultry. The old man attributed the extinction of the winged serpents to the fact that they were terrors in the farmyards and covers. Biblical accounts. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook? Around his teeth there is terror. His strong scales are his pride, shut up as with a tight seal. One is so near to another, that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another, they clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning torches. The sword that reaches him cannot avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He regards iron as straw, bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee, slingstones are turned into stubble for him. Jobs 41-134. In that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan the piercing serpent, even Leviathan that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Isaiah 27-1. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength, thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. Psalm 74 hours 13 minutes -14. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Revelation 12-7-9. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken, for out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent. Isaiah 14:29. The burden of the beasts of the south, into the land of trouble and anguish, from whence come the young and old lion, the viper and fiery flying serpent. They will carry their riches upon the shoulders of young asses, and their treasures upon the bunches of camels, to a people that shall not profit them. Isaiah 30-6. And in that same place there was a great dragon, which they of Babylon worshipped. And the king said unto Daniel, Wilt thou also say that this is of brass? Lo, he liveth, he eateth and drinketh, thou canst not say that he is no living God, therefore worship him. Then said Daniel unto the king, I will worship the Lord my God, for he is the living God. But give me leave, O king, and I shall slay this dragon without sword or staff. The king said, I give thee leave. Then Daniel took pitch, and fat, and hair, and did seethe them together, and made lumps thereof, this he put in the dragon's mouth, and so the dragon burst in sunder, and Daniel said, Lo, these are the gods ye worship. Daniel 14:23-27.